welcome. Today we are going to make these simple cowls. They are super fast to make, so if you want to make them for a Christmas gift this year, you still can. I have two different versions that you can sew up. This one being the first. You can wear it two different ways. So I've got kind of the neck folded over a little bit so you can see the outer layer of fabric, but if you don't want to fold it over, you can just have it folded up like that, kind of cozy under the chin there. And of course, this can go over top of a jacket or tucked inside of a jacket. I'm actually really looking forward to wearing mine for my evening walks with my husband. It's started to snow, so I want to be warm. Now I've got this one here, and this one is just made with simple snaps. And then this one has I think it's called a bone toggle. You can get wooden toggles as well. So there's two different ways that you can do it. I used metal snaps for this one, but I did use a plastic snap for this one. If you don't want to use any snaps, you could easily do buttons and buttonholes, or you could just do this single toggle and then ignore this side. So there's a few different options there for you. I will show you a few different diagrams within this tutorial so that depending on which style you choose, you'll be able to follow those diagrams to put those snaps or buttons or toggle in the correct places. But before we jump into the tutorial, I do want to talk a little bit about fabric. So this inside fabric is a fleece fabric. Now, when I was at the fabric store, there were two different fleeces. You could do either one. I chose the softer of the two fleeces. It was called like a lamb's wool fleece. I don't believe there's actually any lamb's wool in it, but it just felt softer to the touch. So that is the fleece lining that I chose. And then I found this outer fabric. It really didn't have a title as to like what type of fabric it is. It looks like a plaid, but it is a little bit softer. But the nice thing about having the fleece lining is that you can do whatever outer fabric you want. You could even use a quilter's cotton, and you could get some fun and different looks that way. When you are mixing fabrics, keep in mind that fabrics shrink at different rates. So pre-wash your fabric if you are going to be mixing different styles of fabric and sewing them together. That's kind of my most important tip before you start this project. When you're putting this on, I like to put a little ribbon or a piece of leather on that top edge. That way it makes it very easy, especially if you are gifting this to others, to know where that top edge is. So I know where that top edge is, so I can just throw that around my neck. And then I'm going to put those snaps in place. It's easier to do in front of the mirror. And there we go. What do you think? I really like how both of these turned out. So let's jump on in to the sewing tutorial and get started. Start by cutting two pieces of fabric 10 inches high by 35 inches wide. I like to use a fleece for the back and then a nice pretty print for the front. Then you will lay them right sides together and then clip around the entire project. Make sure that along one edge you are leaving a 4-inch gap. I like to mark this with a different type of pin to remind myself not to sew across it. Then you will sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the entire thing, starting at the 4-inch opening and stopping at the 4-inch opening, and starting and stopping with a back stitch. Once you've sewn that seam, then pull out those extra pins, grab a pair of scissors, and snip away all 4 corners. Make sure, of course, not to snip across your seam allowance. By clipping away these corners, you're clipping away the bulk so that this next step, reach on inside and turn it right side out. Gently with your fingers, you will push out those points and they will look so much nicer without that extra bulk. Once you've turned the entire project right side out, then with your fingers, you can just roll along all of those edges and clip around the entire project once again. And then of course that 4-inch opening, just finesse it so that it is nicely lined up with those raw edges, of course, tucked in. Clip across that as well. Then you will take this back to your sewing machine, and this time you will sew a 1/4-inch seam allowance around the entire project, starting and stopping with a back stitch. The reason why you're doing a 1/4-inch seam allowance this time is to make sure that you can close that 4-inch opening. And this is what your cowl will look like once you've sewn around the entire outer edge. Now, this next part I'm going to show you via diagram because I think it will be easier to understand. So in this diagram, you are looking at your cowl with the outer fabric face up. So in my project that I've been sewing up, I've got the plaid fabric. That is the outer fabric. So when looking at this diagram, imagine the plaid fabric face up. This is an optional step. However, I do find it incredibly helpful because it allows you to know where the top of your cowl is. You can add a tag or a little piece of leather to the top portion of the back of your cowl. I like to use a little piece of leather and fold it over that back edge. This leather is cut 3 inches in length, and then I will just sew it in place. Another option is using a piece of ribbon and folding it over that edge, but if it's ribbon, fold in those raw edges before you sew it in place. And now it's time to add snaps or buttons or even some wooden toggles. I will show you exactly where I put my wooden toggles after I walk you through this diagram. So once again, your outer fabric is face up, and now you know where the top edge is. On the top edge, on the left side, you're going to place your snap face up. Measure it in that little center corner there, about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch in from that center point. Then on the left side, on the bottom edge, you'll measure 8.5 inches from that bottom corner in, and that is where you will place your next snap. And you will place that one face up as well. Then on the right hand side, if you added buttons to the left hand side, you will of course add buttonholes to the right side. If you are using snaps, then you will make sure that your snaps are face down, and those are exactly the same measurements. So the bottom one is 8.5 inches from the bottom corner, and the top one is just centered there in that top corner. Now you can definitely follow the measurements that I'm giving you, but I highly recommend that you still take your cowl, wrap it around your neck to get a feel for where everything is going to lay. Then do the same thing, not around your neck, and line up those points. Sometimes your seams may end up thicker or narrower, so following my diagram is good, but I still recommend lining up all of those edges and points before actually adding any snaps or buttons. Okay, so you've seen the diagram where I show you exactly where to put the snaps and obviously where to put that little leather loop or little ribbon loop. I do want to ask before I move on to show you where to add the toggles, if you find this tutorial enjoyable, please click that thumbs up button because that lets YouTube know that this is a good video, and then YouTube will spread it with others. And if you don't want to lose me here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. I love to teach beginner, simple sewing tutorials here on YouTube. All right, let's jump on in to exactly where I place these toggles. In this diagram, I just want to show you where the horn or wooden toggle buttons would sit. Because they're longer, I line up the end of them where perhaps your snap would sit. So on that bottom edge, you can see where that wooden toggle is. The wooden toggle itself is what is lined up to that 8.5 inch measurement. And then in the top right, you can see that I've got the loop facing towards the top edge, and it sits around where I would have that snap sit. And just a tip, if you don't hand sew these toggles in place, you can use your sewing machine. I don't like hand sewing, But what I ended up doing was I extended my stitch length to a 3.5 millimeter stitch length, because if your stitch length is too small, it can actually end up cutting that leather instead of actually stitching it in place. So extend that stitch length, then you can sew it in place, starting and stopping with a back stitch. Now, I like to add my snaps using this little Amazon snap kit. I recommend it in so many of my videos, and I will have both the snap kit and those toggles linked in the description down below. I also have a whole tutorial that walks you through how to add these plastic snaps to projects, and I'm going to have that tutorial linked in the description down below as well. So if you need more detail, you can definitely check that out. So as you can see here, I'm just going to add my snaps. Once again, I'm going to fold my project to make sure everything is in the exact place that I want it. The nice thing about adding snaps is you can just use the awl and push it through all 4 layers, creating the holes that you need to line up. Then I'll just add those snaps in place, and you have created a cowl. You can see the 2 versions that I've created. The black one has the metal snaps and a little ribbon along the top edge, and the red one has the toggle, plastic snaps, and a little leather loop along that top edge. And as you can see here on my black version, I used metal snaps and actually a metal grommet. That little metal grommet is what I used to have my ribbon put in place. And then the metal snaps themselves, I use a cam snap system for them. It is a more expensive system, which is why for beginners, I highly recommend starting with that plastic system. But I will link to my metal system in the description down below as well, if you're interested. And that, my friends, is how you can sew a very easy and quick Christmas present. Let me know in the comments down below what you end up doing, which version you end up choosing, but maybe you end up doing something completely different and making it more personalized to your style. I'm always curious to hear how you guys are making my projects. I hope that you guys have a very Merry Christmas, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.